Hi, my name is Claire Abel, and I will be discussing today in my TED Talk about the tactics the Nazi Party used to gain control and support of the German people during their rise to power. All the information, evidence, and quotes I will be saying today in my talk are from the text from William Allen entitled The Nazi Seizure of Power. Now, William's text, he mentions that the most important thing that the Nazis had wanted to do at the time when they were trying to gain more control is to get their message out there. At this time, that was their main goal. It was to get their message out there and to get as many followers and people to believe in their message and to follow it. And they did that in many different ways using these many different tactics that I will be speaking about. Now, the Nazis used different ways of getting their message out there, like I mentioned, and that was so they could reach the many different people and to attract different people and also to attract masses of people at a time. And so the first way first tactic that they used was the marches that the Nazi Party are known for. And there are many depictions today of the Nazi marches that are very famous. And these marches are famous and because they were organized in a militaristic fashion with perfect rows of men in identical uniforms walking or marching in complete sync. This spectacle of perfection is what initially attracted crowds. And then soon these crowds became followers and supporters of the cause that they saw these perfect soldiers marching for. And an example of this that I found in Allen's text was that the fascination from the people in the crowds is shown in this quote that says, they, meaning not the Nazi soldiers that were marching, had dominated the press and powerfully impressed Northeimers with the size and determination for that they had for during in the marches. For some background knowledge, Northeimers were people that lived in the town of Northeim, which was in Germany. But this quote shows how just by the sheer mass and attention to organization that the Nazi Party drew in people, and then once they had their attention, they took that attention and they fed the people their message. So they didn't always gain people by what their message was or what they stood for. They gained people by catching their attention and they're getting them curious about what was going on. What were these soldiers marching for? Why were they were so perfect? What were they doing? So they followed them, physically followed them, and then once they heard the message, they were like, "Oh, yeah, we're for that. We're going to do that." And so they then followed them through belief of what the Nazis stood for. And so it wasn't always the message that caught people's attention. It was just the performances that they had. And also that goes along with this next tactic that went along with the marches is the public speeches that were given at the marches or the rallies, that what they were also called. So the big thing about the speeches was the message that was being sent out to the audience. The Nazi message was flexible in a way because it could be made to be appropriate for the particular audience that was listening. I'm not saying the Nazis lied to people because they did not lie. They just didn't give the whole truth. They gave out parts of their principles and their standards and what they stood for, and they spoke about that and they harped on only particular things that were appealing to people and to the crowds at the time, but things that may have not been appealing that the Nazis stood for just simply weren't mentioned. They didn't say that they didn't stand for them. They just didn't mention that. And one person in particular that we need to talk about when talking about public speeches is Hitler. because he had this innate skill for performing a speech. Not giving a speech, he performed it. I use the word performing because no hand motion or word or detail of the speech was not practiced and precise. And even his something simple as his facial expression, which although was anger and aggressive most of the time, but it was practiced. He knew what his face looked at a certain part of his speech, and that captured the attention of people. And once he had their attention, they heard his message and how passionate he was for it. And so that was just a way that he could draw people in, and he grabbed them. And the third way the Nazi Party gained supporters were the dynamics that was within the party as a whole. People who were looking for a party that at the time may have either wanted to rebel and act out in violence, they had that in the Nazi Party. But they also, people who wanted to come together and work towards a better future for Germany in a more respectable way. The Nazi Party had that too. So whatever you wanted to do to support your country, the Nazi Party had it, because they had a way for you to act out. It is mentioned in Allen's text, specifically on page 84, that there were two groups in Nazis in wartime. They had the decent Nazis, and then they had the gutter type. And it says, in the end, the gutter won out. And we see this dynamic of the gutter type and the other type as in the SS and the SA. The SS was a military-style organization of men, while the SA was just literally a group of thugs looking for a radical solution to their problems, and that solution always seemed to be answered through violence. So this split within the party gave people options of how they wanted to work towards a solution. And the Nazi leaders didn't care what people chose as long as they chose the Nazi Party. Now, if they wanted to act out in violence, that's fine. If they wanted to be respectable, that's fine. As long as you were a Nazi, that's all they cared about. And so the fourth and final way that I will speak of is the massive amount of propaganda used by the Nazis. And again, it's just their great attention to the little details. See, this tactic was so great because the Nazi propaganda came in different forms. They came in posters and flags and uniforms and armbands that the soldiers wore and films and so many others. But all the things that all the different forms of propaganda that they had in common was the swastika, which is the symbol used to represent the Nazi Party. Now, the swastika was and is to this day a symbol we all remember, not just because it is linked to the Nazi Party, although that is a very large reason why, but because it is a symbol that is bold, black, and it's enhanced by the use of white and red. It was easy to spot a Nazi flag or a soldier from afar just by simply seeing the black swastika and bright and bold white and red. Now, this propaganda, the use of symbols and colors, is not an invention of the Nazi Party. It had been used for centuries before Hitler was even born, but the Nazis simplified it so much and that it worked. It was simple but effective, and the simplicity of the symbol and the and the colors is what was most effective for the Nazis. People knew just like that was a swastika, so that person was for Nazis. And so they linked it together so easily. So the tactics used by the Nazis were not all original to them, and so we can't give them credit for that. But after reading the text and by Allen, we can give them credit for the execution, the perfect execution of these tactics. So we give them that, and it worked for them. So that is my talk on the Nazi tactics. Thank you for listening.